Focusing on the demographics and the generational differences, the way to do this is to conduct focus groups. So you say, okay, fine. This is great, Howard, if I'm going to try a case to nothing but millennials, or if I'm going to try a case to nothing but Gen X, but I get them all. Well, of course we do. We all do. So what you're trying to do here, first of all, is you want to find out what is going to resonate from your case with the millennials. How are the millennials going to talk about your case? What language are they going to use? What metaphors are they going to use? How are the Gen Xers going to do the same thing? How are the boomers going to do the same thing? So the way you do that is you conduct focus groups with nothing but millennials. What we do, just to make sure you get the same input, is we'll have a group, for example, of 21 focus group members or 24 focus group members. And we'll have 8 boomers, we'll have 8 Gen Xers, and 8 millennials. And we will make the presentation to them as a very blank, that is non-adversarial presentation, so that we want to hear them talk about the facts of the case. We're not interested in them deciding who's the best lawyer. We're interested in them see how they process the case. So you make a very plain vanilla presentation to them of all the facts, of everything you want them to know about the case. Then you divide them up into 3 groups and put the millennials together, the Gen Xers together, and the boomers together. Then the first thing you do, you listen to how they talk. You record it all, video it all. You listen to the language of the case. You listen to the language that they use to describe your case. Every case has its own language. Every case has its own terms. And you'll find that the Gen Xers may talk about the same event in your case with different language than the boomers do. So you're going to want to have to incorporate everybody. You're going to want to get it all in there so that it resonates with everybody. But mainly, here's a very powerful tool. When they're talking about it, you ask them at the end of their discussion, usually I go back and say, okay, answer this question for me. X is just like, and take whatever your issue is. I had an issue involving defibrillation. So I said, okay, defibrillation is just like, now everybody write down your answer to this question. Now, and what they do is they'll give you a metaphor then that describes it. Well, I came up with a great metaphor. I got this one from my doctor, but defibrillation is just like electrocution, that type thing. They take a medical term or a technical term or some language of your case that may be complex, and they simplify it and they put it into their language. But their language may be different from the language of the boomers. So you want to get everybody's language. So you put them in different groups, let them talk about it, and then you want to test your technology in front of all of them. So you do the same thing. You show them all the same graphics, the same demonstratives, whatever you're going to use, and then test them on their response to it. Show and tell demonstratives, same thing. Storytelling across demographic lines. The way you get to storytelling is you then ask them, you give them the vanilla presentation, but then you can go back and you can do a second presentation, a second focus group, in which you, instead of giving a plain vanilla presentation, you tell your story. You tell the plaintiff's story the way you would to a jury in opening statement. Then you divide them up into their 3 groups. And then you listen to how they discuss your story. And the first thing you do is you give them a questionnaire based upon it. Every time you put them separated, you give them a questionnaire to answer specifically, individually, whatever questions they have, whatever question you have of them, so that before they start being influenced by general discussion by everybody else, you get their individual opinions. Then you tell a story. Then you put them into separate groups. And then you listen to how they talk about their story, how they talk about your story. Then whoever's debriefing that group in the millennials will say, okay, how would you like to have heard this differently? Who else would you like to have heard from? Who has another important part of this story that might have been told? How else could this be told? What's missing from the story? What's the best part of the story? What's the weakest part of the story? And let them discuss the story for you in detail. Do the same thing with the boomers, and somebody else is in another room doing the same thing with Gen X, and see what you come up with. You end up with a story that you can take all the parts and build a story that resonates across demographic lines with the proper story. So you do the vanilla presentations, you do distinct groups, and then you do mixed groups, and you split them up. You submit written questionnaires to them, you videotape all your proceedings, and I use 18, 21, or 24, depending on the individual case, depending on the issue that I'm trying. And we may do 15 focus groups in one case. I once tried it. I had a case that was getting ready for trial against General Motors. Before I ever filed suit, I had a multi-death case. Three people burned to death, and I had 2 people burned severely. And before I ever filed suit in that case, I did a total of 56 focus groups. Now that's the kind of case that would justify that. So I did 56 focus groups. I tested every single part of that case before focus groups, so that before I filed suit, when I filed that petition, I could have walked upstairs in the same courthouse and picked a jury. I was completely ready before I ever filed suit. And I got ready through focus groups. And by the time I got to where I was starting discovery, I already knew what I needed. I knew what my story was. I knew what my themes were. I knew everything I needed to be proving. And so I had a big, huge leg up on that case. So your method of recognizing the differences is watching the videotapes. Having one person watch the videotapes. You got a person in the room in each room with them, but then you have to sit down and you have to watch all 3 videotapes and compare differences. Then you also get to compare differences on the written answers. That's why the written answers are so important. You listen then and develop the language of your case that you're going to use in trial that is such that it carries all of the language, that it communicates your story to everybody, regardless of their age, regardless of the group that they're in. Then you develop your metaphors and make sure that you have metaphors. You may find that one metaphor is so powerful it resonated with everybody. If not, then you may have to have a different metaphor for Gen X and Gen Y and yet another one for the boomers. And that's okay. Use 2, 3, use whatever number of metaphors you need. But metaphors are powerful because they communicate directly with the unconscious mind. The next thing, you do a rule of 3 quiz at the end of the presentation. I always ask them, list the 3 most important things that you saw in this that you think influenced your decision making. They don't really, keeping in mind that they don't really know why they decided the way they decided, but you want to know what they think are the 3 most important things that influence their decision in the case. And then the second thing is, what are the 3 greatest strengths of the plaintiff's case? And then in that same one, what are the 3 greatest weaknesses of the plaintiff's case? Then what are the 3 greatest strengths of the defense case, and what are the 3 greatest weaknesses of the defense case? Then we go through, separately I talk to them in terms of rhetorical devices. I talk to them in terms of analogies, and that's when we get together and say, finish this sentence. This is just like what? This is, what analogy would you use? Or we have analogies that we've thought up. There's 2 ways to do this. One is you take the metaphors that you've come up with in your own workup and try them out on them and see what works best. But the other more important one is to have them tell you their metaphors. You want to do that first. Before they hear yours, you have them tell you what their metaphors are. That's where you'll get different metaphors that resonate directly with the millennials and with the boomers and with Gen X. So you test your graphics. I've never done a graphic since I did my first focus group in 1984. I've never, ever, ever done a graphic, a piece of demonstrative evidence, or a timeline without presenting it to a focus group. Every time I think that we've got a graphic already and boy, it can't get any better, and we've tested it out with lawyers, referring attorneys, paralegals, everybody, we think, boy, we got this one nailed, and we go in and present it to a focus group, they always find a way to improve it. Timelines, extremely important. Jurors tested, questioned, say that timelines are the most helpful, timelines properly done are the most helpful single graphic that you can use. I give a whole 1-hour speech just on timelines. But quickly, the biggest mistake on timelines is trying to put too much information on the timeline. Every single item on a timeline should have a very definite meaning, a meaning that the juror understands when they look at it. Timelines can be, we have digital timelines that may run for 10 feet if you put them on a wall, on paper, but when you can pull them up digitally, it's very easy. Then you want to test the rules. What is their reaction to the rules that you're relying on and how do they think you could better present the rules and the effect of the violation of the rules, and just what do they think of the rules? Protocols, the same thing with malpractice cases. What do they think of the protocol? Do they understand the protocol? Do they understand the reason for the protocol? And how would they present the protocol? How would they improve your presentation of the protocol? So you test cross-generational storytelling, then you put together a story that reaches everybody based on what you've learned, and you test your case-specific facts. Now you take your case-specific facts, you put it all together into this, and after you do all that, then you bring in a focus group that consists of everybody all mixed up together, and you put it all, you test it with them all at one time, just like you would a jury, and let them deliberate together and see how the whole thing works when you don't separate them, because that's the way the jury will be. Test the response to each element of damage, and in psychology, the things that we learn are the reptile, the culture code, the rules of the road. Those are all things that I think are extremely important right now for us to study and know, and then we test the rules with the juries and we see what works. I hope this has been helpful to you in helping your clients. Thank you very much.